We're looking at homework from section 5.1. This is question number 18. A standardized exam's scores are normally distributed. In a recent year, the mean test score was 1,463 and the standard deviation was 314. The test scores of 4 students selected at random are 1,850, 1,200, 2,180, and 1,350. Find the z-scores that correspond to each value, and then determine whether any of the values are unusual. So before we can find the z-scores, we need to remember what that z-score formula is. So let's go ahead and review the z-score for a standard normal distribution. The z-score formula is z equals x minus mu over sigma. Remember, mu is the mean and sigma is the standard deviation, and x is the data value that we're given. So the values that we need here are mu equals 1463 and sigma equals 314. Now we can turn to each x value to find out their z-scores. So the first x value was 1,850. Inserting these three values for x, mu, and sigma into the z-score formula, we get that z equals 1850 minus 1463 over 314. Which equals 387 over 314, and the z-score, rounded to 2 decimal places, is 1.23. For 1200, we have 1200 minus 1463 over 314. That's negative 263 over 314. And when we use our calculator rounding to 2 decimals, we get negative 0.84. When x is 2180, we have z equals 2180 minus 1463 over 314. That's 717 over 314. And dividing, rounding to 2 decimals, we get a z-score of 2.28. Our final x value is x equals 1,350. So we plug that in to the z-score formula. And when we subtract, we get negative 113 over 314, which gives us a z-score of negative 0.36. So, which values, if any, are unusual? Select the correct choice and fill in the box if necessary. Okay, so what does it take to be unusual? Well, if you remember when we talked about the empirical rule, we said that any data value that was more than 2 standard deviations away from the mean would be considered unusual. In terms of z-scores, that means if a data value has a z-score less than negative 2 or more than positive 2, then it would be unusual. So if we look at the z-scores we have here, the only one that's outside that range is 2.28. That's more than 2. More than 2 standard deviations away from the mean makes it an unusual value. So do we enter 2.28 here? And the answer is no. Notice how the question is worded. It says find the z-scores that correspond to each value. So the values are the scores on the exams. The 1850, the 1200, the 2180, and the 1350. Those are what we call the values in this problem. So it's asking for, are there any unusual values? So values will refer to the test scores themselves, not the z-scores. So which test score was unusual? And the answer here is 2,180. And that's your answer.